Good evening and welcome to the NCARC TechNet. This is November 7 Golf Echo Sierra N7GES. The name is Kevin. And we're here each Monday evening to discuss amateur radio, technical, and other topics. You're hearing us either on the 447-275 repeater, the 447-75 repeater, on Echolink at W0UPS-R, and we are streaming to YouTube. And if you have questions or comments you'd like to make for the net, certainly check in with us at any time. Or if you want to email us comments, elmers@ncarc.net is the place for that. We've got a fairly complex topic, not complex, but several aspects of it tonight that I'd like to hopefully cover. So we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But first, let's see who is here and would like to check in. You can still participate if you don't check in, but it's always nice to know who's out there.
Well, it may be a short net tonight, Kevin. This is Greg. November 0 Echo Mike Papa, Fort Collins, with Debbie K0DBE.
Kilo Alpha 6, Echo Tango Echo, Jim, Loveland.
K0LAO, Phil in Luann.
KB0SCX, George and Bertha.
W0ASP, Terry, also in Bertha.
All right, thank you, and welcome to W0ASP, KB0SCX, K0PRB, K0LAO, KA6ETE, K0DBE, and N0EMP. Welcome to all of you. Anybody else at this point?
This is ABZ, Ben, for calls.
KG0HM.
Okay. Welcome to KG0HM. We had a double. Ben, I missed your call, and I should know it by now, but I couldn't quite get it. Come back with yours if you would, please, just as a reminder to me, and then we'll see who else we missed.
Kevin, yeah, it's AE0, Charlie. They're just doing it. Alpha Echo 0, Charlie Foxtrot.
That's right. Thank you very much. And then there was another station as well, I believe. I did get KG0HM. Was there somebody else in there? Okay. Anybody else want to check in at this time?
KC0 RBT.
Kilo Echo 0, Tango Mike Delta.
Whiskey 0, Delta Alpha Sierra, W0DAS, Dave, Fort Collins.
This is Kilo Echo 0, Lima Charlie Kilo, KE0LCK, the other Mike from Windsor.
Whiskey 7, Kilo Romeo Uniform, Rick and Drake.
Okay, very good. W7KRU, KE0LCK, W0DAS, KE0TMD, KC0RBT. Welcome to all of you. Anybody else before we continue? Okay, now just a reminder, if you haven't checked in, you can still chat with us, and please do. Also remember, next week is our first month meeting, first net. Let me try that again. Next week being the first of the month, we're having an open topic. So please think of things you'd like to ask about and come prepared with questions. Used to be we always had extra questions, and I think there probably are still plenty of those around, so feel free to come ask them. Okay, for today, the topic, if any of you saw it on the internet, HF noise, what, where, why, and how. Where does the noise come from? Both the deep and close space, the atmospheric and man-made. We've talked a lot about man-made before, but and some about the other, but not as much. Why is noise greater on HF than on frequencies above VHF? Why fog, rain, snow, and such affects VHF and above rather than HF? And what is the Aurora and its effect on HF and VHF? Lots of different things. Discussion of S+N/N noise ratios. This was suggested by Dave, W0LEV, and there's some great topics here, and hopefully we haven't put too terribly much all into one net. But let me leave it open first and see if anybody would like to start commenting on any of these questions.
Hey, Kevin, my list wasn't meant to be multiply combined. That's too many for one net. W0LEV.
Hi there, Dave. Yeah, I thought about that too, and we can sure separate it later if we discover that we're too many of us, too many things going on. But I thought I'd propose several topics that we can discuss, and then we can extend it over as well. So, and by all means, I didn't put everything you came up with, but let's summarize anyway. And who would like to begin on this tonight?
DAS.
Okay, we had a double. I heard DAS first. Go ahead.
Hi, Kevin in the net. Yeah, I just had a phenomena that I experienced today that I'd like to ask a question about a little bit later, but definitely was being talked about as atmospherics and an odd noise on HF, so it'll fit in well.
Okay, very good. Bet that's high noon net you're thinking of asking about, right?
Yeah, it was a high noon net phenomena that I was not the only one experiencing. Other people were commenting on it too. It was a sort of it almost sounded like a jet engine sound, but changed with phasing. There was a phasing sound in there as well. But I think it was N7MZW at the end of the net commented he thought it was atmospheric. So that was one that I was very curious about. N7GES W0DAS.
W0LEV.
LEV, go ahead. I did not hear this today, but I saw the email about it. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, there were a few emails exchanged locally amongst us who heard it. I think anybody listening with a good antenna system heard it. It's not atmospheric. That's a wild-ass guess, excuse me. To me, it sounded like, going back to the Cold War, the Russian noise jammers, not the woodpecker, but the noise jammers. And Paul and I got quite a look at it on the waterfall. It is definitely man-generated. It is stronger on the East Coast. The East Coasters have been hearing it a lot longer than we have here in the middle of the country. It is man-made. We don't know what it is right now, but yeah, it's really beginning to take a toll on high noon. It's not atmospheric. It's coming off the ionosphere. I could easily hear ionospheric modulation on the thing. It's man-made. Don't know where it's from. W0LEV.
PRB.
Okay, PRB, go ahead.
You know, it's quite funny because we had something similar. I went down to listen to the high noon net on 7.240, and my noise level was plus 40. I mean, it was way up there. It was, and if I could turn on the noise blanker, it would help a little bit because it felt like it had a pulsing noise to it. But it was huge. I even went to the point of calling and asking somebody to come out and check this transformer behind the house because I thought it was coming from there. I took a radio, just an AM radio, and walked through the house, and it was all through the house on my electrical. And if I held it up to the breaker box, it was loud. It was big time there. So I started shutting things off, and of course, when you turn the breaker off, let me reset, please. So when you turn the breaker off, of course, it would diminish, and it was quite interesting that it dropped quite a bit. But while we were checking things out and playing with breakers, it suddenly disappeared. It was very interesting. I had never seen a noise level as high as plus 40 like that. Typically, I have around, a 7 or an 8 on the S meter. So I'm wondering if this is what everybody else was experiencing, or did I definitely have a problem in the house and it just disappeared. Anyway, back to the net.
Well, my guess from what you described is that you've got another thing similar to what I have over here, which is not the same as what they were referring to. I also have a very high electrical static sound, which goes and comes suddenly. Like that. I have not taken the time yet to try to walk through my house and see if it's something here. I know I need to do that. I have a suspicion that it's not here, but that's a wild guess and not necessarily a very educated one. But that sounds very similar to what I have, and mine just obliterates just nearly everybody when it comes up. In fact, I had it on Thursday when I did high noon net, but I did not notice the noise level that people have been commenting about. So I don't know whether that says it was not a problem on Thursday or my antenna just doesn't hear it, but so far I've not experienced it, but I've not been on that net every day thus far. So I think we've probably got two different phenomena going on there. Both sounds as if they're both definitely on the man-made side. Anyway, any other comments on this before we get back to our sort of our topic order here?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, LEV.
Yeah, what you're describing, Phil, is something very different than what Paul and I traded emails about. A quantitative, real, honest-to-goodness quantitative measurement at my place with my antenna on the 7610 is minus 85 dBm. And if you don't know what a dBm is, go look it up. It's definitely off the ionosphere. What Phil is describing evidently is not off the ionosphere. So we're talking about two different interference problems. W0LEV, I better go back to throwing parsnips in the fry pan.
Let's see if I have it. K0PRB again. Thanks, Dave. No, this was a noise level that I've never seen. Plus 40 on my meter. I couldn't hear a thing. Of course, it was just way up there, and never had it like that before. But I'd be interested to find out how to chase it out, because no matter what I did, whatever breakers I turned on, it was always there. And if I tried to chase it through the house with an AM radio, anytime I got the AM radio anywhere next to an outlet or anywhere next to a power line of any sort within the house, it was there. So it was all through the house on the power side. But I could not pick it up when I killed the breaker and listened to the line coming to the house. So I assume it's somewhere in the house, but it's boy, that's a tough one to chase down. It was so loud and everywhere. All I can do is just go through and check connections and make sure everything's tight.
Well, that's a good one to talk a little more about. I don't want to take too much time on this net to talk about that, only because we have a lot of other noise sources tonight that we haven't discussed much about that I'd like to talk about. But the fact that you kill it completely when you turn your breakers off certainly might say something about where it is. But also, I'm kind of wondering if it's still coming in from the outside and the breakers kill it. I don't know about that for sure. So I won't make any solid decisions on that one. If I may, though, this is N7GES with the NCARC TechNet. Let's get back to our this evening's topics, some of which we've certainly been already discussing. Noise, especially atmospheric and deep space, which we've not talked much about, and man-made, which we've covered a lot in the past. Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about some of those things before you're back to the kitchen, or are you already gone?
I'm still here. Yeah, I'm making it. I can comment a few things. A good test for a reasonable receiver on HF and a reasonable antenna. Difference between a 50 ohm on the antenna port of the transceiver and your antenna should be 6 dB. And heaven forbid, don't measure that on an S meter. They're all uncalibrated, unless you got a real ICOM radio of recent. It's one of my hot buttons. You should have at least 6 dB of noise, and you may have to use preamp on 10, 12, 15, 17, and 20, 40, or 30, 40, 75, 160. No preamp, please. There should be at least 6 dB of noise increase between dummy load and antenna connected. If there isn't, something's wrong. Where's the noise come from? A combination of man-made and atmospheric and deep space celestial noise, which increases as the frequency decreases. And Terry can speak to that far better than I can. But it opens up a whole ball of snakes. But basically, a lot of it's natural. There's nothing you can do about it. Man-made noise, if you live in a city, you're sunk. Live out here where I am. Most of my antenna noise is not man-made. It comes out of the atmosphere and deep space. For instance, I run 24/7, 365, a receiver on 20.1 megahertz. I see every day what we call diurnal variation. That is the difference between day and nighttime noise. The sun is noisy, as we all know. It puts out lots of RF, lots of light, lots of IR, lots of UV, so on and so forth. It's expected. The noise increases in the day on HF. That's normal. I'm upside down. Why? The biggest increase in my diurnal noise is at night, when Cygnus and Cassiopeia are overhead to my 20.6 antenna, or 20.1 megahertz antenna. That's normal. That's deep space. That pretty much covers it in a nutshell. There's lots more that can be said, but in summary, W0 LEV.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dave. W0 ASP, are you in a place where you would like to add some comments here?
Oh, hi, Kevin. Yeah, W0 ASP. I am, but the topic is still really broad. Maybe I'll narrow it down a little bit and comment on one thing, atmospheric noise. The general source of atmospheric noise is lightning discharges. And I think anybody who's worked HF during a lightning storm would recognize the increase in noise locally. But this thing, the ionosphere that we use for HF communication, reflects noise power just as well as it reflects our transmitted signals. So what happens is the Earth's ionosphere tends to trap in lightning noise generated across the planet at frequencies below about 10 megahertz.
Okay. Thanks, Terry. Appreciate that. Yes, I know it's a broad topic, and yeah, we, like I say, we'll play that by ear as we go along here and revisit it if necessary. Okay, thank you. We've talked about the atmospheric. Can somebody fill us in a little bit more about the deep space and close space noise? Obviously, we know some of that from sun, I'm sure, causing some of that. But let's see, for my edification, I guess, and whatnot, what's the difference and what are some of the primary causes there?
Well, like I related in my last transmission, my diurnal noise plot is upside down because what I'm seeing at night is Cygnus and Cassiopeia. They're hundreds of light years out, and very similar to what generates noise from the sun, magnetic fields. We also get synchrotron radiation, which is due to electrons spiraling the magnetic field, which permeates all of space. We detected that at LTO as well. Black body radiation. Any body that's above absolute zero has a characteristic emission spectrum, which I won't go into because I don't have a whiteboard and nobody will understand. That basically increases with increasing temperature. And I'm speaking degrees Kelvin, not Fahrenheit or centigrade, although centigrade is easily relatable to kelvins. Minus 273 degrees is absolute zero Kelvin, plus a bunch of decimal points, I suppose, if you do NIST. But many sources, many physical ways of generating that celestial noise. They're all real, and frankly, that's what radio astronomy is all about.
Okay, very good, thank you. Other comments on that, on this first, my question, which was space noise specifically.
W0ASP.
SP, go ahead.
Well, the sun certainly does generate a lot of noise, and if you're talking about HF bands, it's interesting that the noise we hear from the sun is self-limiting because the ultraviolet radiation from the sun creates this thing we call the D layer, ionospheric D layer, and that is very, very absorbing to radio waves. This is why we don't use 160 meters in the daytime. So this D layer also blocks or absorbs the HF energy coming from our sun when the sun is up. So that's another factor in near-Earth natural noise sources.
Yeah, one further comment, Terry.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, the sun radiates much like a black body radiator. Nominal temperature, and anybody indulged in photography will latch onto the number 5,000 degrees Kelvin. That is a characteristic, or that is a black body radiation curve that's characteristic of a 5,000 degree Kelvin black body radiator, or absorber for that matter. Generally, the far field or celestial sources can be divided into two types, broadband and narrowband. Narrowband, for instance, the elemental hydrogen emission at 1420 at 42571 and a few more decimal places, megahertz, is a narrow band. Won't go into how that's generated, but it's narrow band. Broadband, that's black body radiation, synchrotron radiation. It is broadband, not single frequency. It's nothing that you can tune your receiver to and hear a characteristic signal. It receives as noise. So two discrete sources. One is individual discrete frequencies, which you won't hear as discrete frequencies due to Doppler broadening and Doppler shift. And broadband noise, which is truly broadband, but has a characteristic temperature-related emission characteristic, W0LEB.
Okay, so that brings a question to my mind. The broadband noise is something that you won't necessarily perhaps pinpoint then. Is that correct? Are we when you say broadband, are you talking like probably an entire amateur band of frequencies, or narrower than that? And are you're just going to hear an increase of white noise essentially there, not a particular noise characteristic? And that's question one. Let me let you answer that first. So the broadband is not something that you'll necessarily hear other than as an increase in like white noise. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And if you indeed detect it over a very broad band, that is hundreds, possibly thousands of megahertz, it will appear Gaussian. Well, thousands of megahertz, you might begin to see the characteristic temperature-related blackbody curve, or the, well, electromagnetically dictated spiraling electrons in a magnetic field in synchrotron radiation. But all you'll see is an increase in your S meter. If your AGC is operating properly, you won't hear an increase, but they never do. Yeah, it will be perceived as an increase in just a hiss.
Okay. My second question regarding your comment was the specific frequency noise, but you said because of Doppler and various things, you won't perceive as a specific frequency. Is that also going to be perceived as white noise, but in a specific area, or is that going to have a characteristic sound to it?
It will still be perceived as a hiss. It will sound the same, but if you look at a little broader frequency, but not as broad as you would for black body or synchrotron radiation, you will see characteristic, well, Doppler broadening. What happens there, take the hydrogen line, which we look at intensely at LTO. Theoretically, it should be at 1420.402.571, blah, 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 more decimal points, megahertz. What you're going to hear if you listen in a 3 kilohertz, 15, 20, 30, 50, 100 kilohertz bandwidth is just hiss, just like real broadband noise. What happens is that single frequency at 1420.402.571 is generated by hydrogen clouds, non-ionized elemental hydrogen. Those clouds have a specific temperature. And you will have some molecules coming toward you, that is blue shifted, some leaving you, i.e. in optics it'll be red shifted, and everything in between. So that single line, theoretical single line, becomes broadened. And ideally, if you look at the hydrogen line, it's not a line. Typically, you want to look at about 10 megahertz. We're trying our best to look at 10 megahertz at LTO. But if you perceive it on an amateur receiver with even 50 or 100 kilohertz bandwidth, you'll just hear an increase in noise as you tune across the Doppler broadened frequency of 1420.402.571.
Okay, very good. Other questions on this part of the topic here before I go on?
Yeah, Kevin, we're getting too technical. W0 LEV.
DAS.
DAS, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, so thank you, both Terry and Dave. Kevin, you mentioned earlier the deep space, which I think we were just talking about, but you also brought up close space, and I was wondering what noises fall into close space. And back to Terry's original comment about atmospheric noise and lightning being the main cause, I have noticed that on very windy days that there is often noise, and I was wondering if that was sort of a static discharge from like dust moving around and things like that. W0DAS.
There are such things as rain static, snow static, dust static. Each little small particle of dust, rain, ultimately accumulates a small amount of charge passing through the atmosphere and picked up on the Earth. When they hit the antenna, they produce discharge. Attention on the particle. So yes, they indeed produce.
TV, we almost completely lost you on that one, and it sounded interesting. Can you try that again?
Yeah, the 750 repeater lost me out in the kitchen. Can't apologize for it. It's not my problem. Dust particles picked up off of the earth by wind pick up a little charge from the surface they left. Snow, rain, even sand particles, as they move around, rub against other particles, pick up charges. When they hit your antenna wire or antenna structure, the potential is usually different. And nature doesn't like that. So when they hit your antenna, they give a little discharge. And that produces rain static, snow static, sand static. It's not the most common phenomena, but it's very real. That's one source of real, honest-to-goodness, terrestrial-only noise.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this? Okay. The question, why is this stuff greater on HF than VHF and above? I'm guessing most of that is wavelength oriented, but would anyone like to comment more specifically on that?
EMP.
About 750 repeater working. I can't work it from the kitchen, so somebody else take it. W0LEB.
At a double, I think. EMP, go ahead.
Yeah, Kevin, like Terry touched on earlier, when we were on the topic of atmospheric noise, we see about 100 lightning discharges a second on average on the Earth. And because they're so big and because they're low frequency, that gets ducted all over the planet, which is why we can't really use 80 meters very well or 160 meters in North America in the spring and summer, because any thunderstorm anywhere in North America, you're going to hear it here, whereas in the winter that dies off. But worldwide, when we don't have the thunderstorms here in the winter, of course it's summer in the southern hemisphere, so the overall noise stays more constant. This lightning noise, the energy really is at its peak down around 10 kilohertz, which is of course way below any of our bands. And it begins dropping off as you go higher in frequency. So there's much more of that energy in the HF band below 16 megahertz than there is above 16 megahertz. It drops off the higher you go, to where by the time you get over 30 megahertz, two things are happening. The first thing is, just by the way the energy drops off with frequency, it's really dropped down low. And the second thing is you're not getting that long distance ionospheric propagation anymore. Once you get up, like for instance right now, you're not going to see typically 10 meter DX open with the solar cycle where it is right now, so you're not going to be DXing 10 meter noise from Africa right now either. So then you get up into VHF and above, unless there's a weird tropospheric duct or something that opens up, that lightning noise that's generated far away just isn't going to get here. Then on the other topic, let me reset this. As far as the near space and far space noise, deep space noise is concerned, I don't think we're really going to normally notice that in our hobby in the presence of all the other HF noise that's out there. It's certainly of an interest to amateur and professional radio astronomers, and people like Dave and Terry, but from the point of what we call noise or interference, it's really not going to be a factor to an amateur, I don't think, because the atmospheric noise from lightning and all the stuff from switching power supplies and modern electronics, all that noise is going to drown it out and zero EMP.
Yeah, I'm back. If you live in the cities, your predominant noise is man-made, and thank China for a lot of it. Switching supplies with no decoupling or any care for EMCRFI. If you live out where I do, like Greg commented or Terry, most of our antenna noise, especially above the F0, F2 frequency, is celestially derived light years away. But unfortunately, with the environment today, you won't hear it in the cities.
Okay. Other comments on this part of our topic? Questions, comments here?
W0 ASP.
ASP, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to expound on Greg's comments as a practical matter, is that these non-atmospheric sources, extra galactic sources or outside the Earth, are not significant to most radio amateur operations. If you're working the gigahertz bands and the sun comes in your view, or some of the other celestial radio sources come into view, that might come into play, but that's a fairly high-end application for radio amateur communication. And the only other significant source of radio energy in our solar system is Jupiter, and that does produce radio signals that you can hear and recognize as being a signal. It appears as not just fuzz, but many of these signals from Jupiter appear as popcorn noise, like hail, or very slow waves of noise coming and going. So that's the one noise source that if you actually tuned on a narrowband receiver and listened to it, that you would recognize that it has a characteristic audible signature.
And if you see Jupiter on SDR with good bandwidth displayed on the waterfall, it's spectacular. It's not narrowband. It is narrowband at any given moment in time, but the laser that produces that energy is not a very stable resonator. But yeah, it will sound on a narrowband receiver probably more like popcorn than anything else. W0 LEV, 15 meters is favorite for that.
Okay. Thank you very much, folks. Interesting stuff here. Questions or other comments before we continue?
Question, DAS.
DAS, go.
So two frequencies that were mentioned, one for the hydrogen alpha in the 14 megahertz, and Dave just mentioned 15 meters. Are there specific frequencies, and could he repeat that 14 megahertz frequency?
Yeah, you're up in the low microwave region, roughly half the frequency of the microwave oven. It's 1420 dot decimal 402.571 megahertz, or 1.420 some odd decimal point gigahertz. 15 meters, any amateur with a decent antenna outside without a lot of city noise we'll certainly be able to hear Jupiter on 15 meters. If it's there, it'll cover the band. Some areas of the band, it'll be stronger than others. But Jupiter can be heard on about any good 15-meter setup.
All right. Very good. Thank you very much. Okay. So we've touched on this just a little, but not exactly. The question was raised: why fog, rain, and snow affect VHF and up and above rather than HF so much? Anybody want to make a comment on that?
I can't, but I'm monopolizing this, and I don't like to do that. Place yourself in a concert hall, and the absolute closing chord of one of Beethoven's symphonies, it's always raucous, and it cuts off fast. If you think through the reverb within the auditorium, the high frequencies will cease to echo well before the low frequencies, the timpanis and bass fiddles and so on. Why? The high frequencies, as a function of wavelength, experience more attenuation. If you look at attenuation as a function of wavelength, wavelength's pretty long, even at 7 megahertz, 120 feet for a full wavelength. But when you get up to 2 meters, well, you got 6 feet. Consequently, the effect of rain, snow, whatever, fog, is far more drastic for the shorter wavelengths than it is the long wavelengths.
Okay, thank you much. Yeah, Dave, I know, it's okay, but it's okay. I appreciate your explanations. So, everybody else, please don't hesitate to jump in, but Dave, don't hesitate either. I appreciate all of it. And I appreciate the analogies. Certainly for me that helps. I hope that also helps other people as well. Interesting stuff. Okay, any other comments there?
Well, just for you, Kevin, take some of the huge European cathedrals with their organs. And the little 1-foot, half-foot flutes die out a whole bunch faster than the 32-foot pedal notes. W0 LED, just for you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. The NCARC TechNet. The next part of what I had here to ask about, and these are as much curiosities for me as anybody else, and some of this is certainly in our amateur exams as well, but it never hurts to revisit them. What is the Aurora and its effect on HF and VHF? Anybody want to make a comment about that?
ASP, I can explain the Aurora.
Go ahead.
Well, the Aurora, as a natural phenomena, is caused by plasma particles that are generated by the sun that get into the Earth's magnetic field system and propagate down this magnetic field lines. And when these high energy particles interact with our atmosphere, they ionize the atmosphere, similarly to the way that the sun's UV ionizes the atmosphere, but the light, the ultraviolet light, is not constrained by magnetic field lines, whereas these energetic charged particles from the sun are constrained by the Earth's magnetic field. so they are concentrated in areas around the magnetic poles where they can get into the Earth's atmosphere. And when they do so, they ionize the Earth's atmosphere and they provide a reflector for radio waves.
Yeah, Terry, I just might comment one more. Excellent, but let's go beyond. We view the Aurora and Aurora Borealis and Aurora Australis on the south end. We view them as colors. That color is actually the phenomenon of fluorescence. The accelerated particles at the poles, most of the time at the poles, produce fluorescence. They produce ions, strip off the electrons. That's what produces reflection of the radio waves. The electrons cascading back to a stable condition around the ionized atoms produce the fluorescence, much like ultraviolet, be it long wave or short wave, produces fluorescence in many naturally occurring minerals.
Okay, so I'm gathering from this discussion that it is a noise source, but also ends up being a reflector of RF, which means we get propagation that we don't necessarily usually get. Am I right on both of those accounts?
There's no doubt the ionization or recombination to neutral charge does produce RF noise. However, in the ionized state, it's much like a meteor coming in, or much like, if you will, an artificial aurora that's produced by cascading solar particles rather than ultraviolet producing the ionosphere. It produces a plasma, and a plasma reflects, correctly termed refracts, electromagnetic energy of the proper wavelength. Auroral flutter is something to behold. I have worked and heard it a few times on 2 meters. A nicely modulated single-tone voice will come out sounding like warmed over death because of the Doppler shift induced by the auroral clouds. 7 megahertz, very common on polar propagated signals. Used to be Radio Moscow was good at it. Anybody else coming over the poles and even pack rim between 4 and 6 o'clock local on 40 meters, you'll hear auroral flutter on the foreign broadcast out of the pack rim.
Okay. Thank you. Very good. Okay, let me see. Other questions at this point?
N0 EMP.
EMP, go ahead.
Yeah, for W0DAS and W0LEV, anyone else that may have heard that weird noise on the high noon net, if they could stand by after the net, I had something I wanted to have them listen to.
Yeah, you might listen tomorrow, Greg, because over the last couple of weeks it's been getting stronger and stronger. And Paul looked at some of the East Coast SDRs. It's much stronger on the East Coast than it here in mid-continent. Obviously not coming out of the pack rim. It's not polar propagation because I do not sense any of the typical polar modulations on the signal. So you might give it a listen tomorrow.
Yeah, will do, but there's a little discussion I wanted to have that's totally off topic to have after the net tonight as well in 0 EMP.
DAS.
DAS, go.
Yeah, I'll be around, Greg, so give a shout. W0 DAS.
Oh, thank you. This would be the what did we used to call it, the graduate level net that used to happen after our net. Very good, thank you. Sounds interesting to me too, because I haven't yet heard this noise, so this is something new for me. All right, we've covered a lot of a little bit of a lot of different topics. Surely we must have some questions. Do we have additional comments or questions about any of these things?
KD0 AMJ.
Good evening, AMJ. Go ahead. What's the name and where are you at?
I'm in Arvada, Colorado. Just on my HT in the living room. I didn't actually have any question, but I was just letting you know that I've been listening since 7 o'clock, and I want to hear the noise too. So I just wanted to make sure I was getting into the repeater and letting you know that I was here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, it sounds like several of us are going to be interested in this little discussion and hearing the noise there. So, very good, and welcome, and glad to have you with us. Anybody else? Comments or questions on our topics here? Okay, the one area we did not discuss much about yet tonight, I could certainly use the clarification. The S+N/N ratios. What are we talking about? I know we're talking signal to noise, but can somebody clarify what we're dealing with here? I assume we're talking about comparisons and that sort of thing in order to measure how much signal we're getting above noise. But can somebody clarify that a little bit more for me?
All right, I'll take it again. But I will give Terry the credit for the demonstration at LTO at the Ham Club W0 VHF a couple of years ago. This is typically referred to in a vernacular as SNR. And you have one person in front of a room of maybe 30 students, another person in the back of the room, and the person in the front is going to issue some kind of a message like, maybe, do you hear me? And the person in the back of the room is supposed to report what he said in the front of the room. When all of the 28 students are quiet, there is no problem whatsoever for the guy in the back of the room to decipher what the guy in the front of the room is saying, or student. However, turn the 28 other students in the room loose to just jabbering and talking and whatever they do verbally, and the guy in the front of the room issues a comment that the guy in the back of the room is supposed to hear. The guy in the back of the room can't hear anything but the cacophony of the 28 students between the front and the back. That illustrates signal plus noise to noise. The noise is equivalent to the 28 students between the front and the back of the room talking to each other. Transmitter and receiver, transmitter front of the room, receiver back of the room, is our communication path, be it RF, audio, whatever. I think that Terry did this. It's really a good illustration. that illustrates signal plus noise to noise, and it's not just simply signal plus noise. The noise adds confusion to the intended signal, and typically in communication on a radio we require at least 6 dB, normally in the amateur world about 10 dB above noise for a signal on sideband to be properly decoded. The WSJTX defeats that by other means that I won't go into. CW, considering you can use a much narrower bandwidth than sideband, can crawl further into the noise than typical standard communication. Those of us who run EME, Earth, or Moon Balance, kind of get trained real fast to copy CW at 10 dB below the noise level. I hope that illustrates it. And again, I have to give credit for Terry for that illustration, but I think it really tells it well. W0LEV.
Okay, excellent. And we have a lot of noise sources and stuff there to add into that equation. So, other comments about this?
Yeah, let me add one more somewhat cynical comment to that, what I just said. Those of you who invoke a preamp under noisy conditions to better copy a signal, you're doing the darn wrong thing. Just absolutely wrong. You're amplifying the signal and the noise, and what's worse, you're adding a little bit of noise in addition to what's already there due to the preamp noise. Just turn the darn preamp off and live with it. If you can't copy the guy, don't bother. Yeah, with the preamp on, the S meter will jump around a little more, but the question is, does invoking the preamp increase the signal plus noise to noise any? In most cases, the answer is an overwhelming no. Learn when to use and not to use a preamp. W0LV.
Well, there's another one that I've heard before but not really understood, so thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, other questions or comments?
SB?
Go ahead, Terry.
I have a favorite analogy about signal and noise, and I'd like to put it into a colorful context. Presume you have a pencil, a very sharp pencil, and say your objective was to give someone a prison tattoo. You would want to put the point of that pencil very precisely into a particular pattern. This would be equivalent to the signal that we want to communicate with people. Well, take your pencil and put a very large or a variable size cotton ball on the end of it, and then try to determine where the tip of the pencil is. You can't do that very well if the cotton ball is very large compared to the length of the pencil. And the bigger the cotton ball gets, or the shorter the pencil gets, the less ability you have to put the tip of that pencil where you want to put it. And that's sort of a mechanical equivalent of signal and noise. The cotton ball is the noise, and the pencil is the signal. W0ASP.
And the bigger the cotton ball, the more gain there is in the preamp.
This is N7GES in the TechNet, and sometimes I get a little distracted here. All righty. By interesting analogies. All right, very good. Other comments or questions? This has got to certainly, hopefully, has inspire some other questions from people. Anything anybody'd like to bring up at this time?
EMP.
EMP.
So on the signal-to-noise ratio topic, it's no secret to anyone that's listened to me very much that I'm a huge fan of software-defined radio receivers. And there's, of course, quite a lot of them out there now with various characteristics. Almost all of them have at least one adjustable gain stage, whether it's a preamp or a mixer amplifier. There are some that have 2 gain stages. There's some that have 3 gain stages. A preamp that you can adjust how much gain it has. A mixer that you can adjust the gain in. And then what they usually call an IF, or intermediate frequency amplifier, or demodulation amplifier, that is your 3rd gain stage. And when you're trying to especially pull something weak out of the noise, it's a major benefit with the spectrum display that you have with a SDR. You see the noise floor, and you see maybe a faint trace of the signal you're interested in on some frequency. And by adjusting each of those gains independently, you can see what you're doing, and if what you're doing is raising the signal and the noise together, you're not helping things at all. But if what you're doing raises the signal above the noise, you do that on each stage as much as you can. Typically, as you start raising the gain, that signal will come up above the noise and keep coming up by itself until you get to a point where all of a sudden the noise floor is also raising up next to it at the same rate. And at that point you stop with that stage and go on to the next stage and do the same thing, and so on, to optimize your signal-to-noise ratio for that signal on that antenna at that location at that time with that radio. And that's one of the neat things that's a lot easier to do in an SDR than it is in other radios and zero EMP.
Well, that's got to be fascinating to watch, and I would think very interesting to hear, although I'm guessing that some of that, some of what you see is subtle enough that before you start hearing it, you've already had to do a fair amount of adjustments. So I don't know. But that is very interesting explanation of that, and the fact that you can actually see it, and determining a difference between adding everything or just raising signal above the noise level. Very good, thank you. Others, please. Anything else? Questions or comments? Okay, we covered a lot of things here. I can't believe that we covered it all as well as we might have. I would appreciate very much having comments. If you would take the time to email me with comments or questions, I would very much appreciate it. It does take a little bit of your time, but it will help me know what people are looking for or would like to have better. I have very few comments and on the net, and I hope that's an indication that people are satisfied, but it could also be an indication that people are either overwhelmed or not interested. So I'd certainly rather have the comments with the indications of what people are interested in, especially if we need to cover a topic more than we have. In the case of tonight, we did pick a very broad topic set, and I don't know if we should have covered some of these things more thoroughly, but comments would be very appreciated. And if you would like to see us cover some of these parts of these topics better, please let me know. Again, the place to comment is the email address elmers@ncarc.net. See if I can do this tonight. Echo, Lima, Mike, Echo, Romeo, Sierra, at Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club, NCARC.net. Comments, questions are always appreciated and help me greatly know what people would like to hear more about, or what they would like more clarification about, or how they're feeling about what they're hearing on the net.
Yeah, Kevin, go beyond that. The Elmers on NCRC is there for a good reason for all of you. If you have a question, please post it. Those of us who occasionally punch up that particular link will try and answer. It's for all of us. But Kevin has pleaded. We got pretty technical tonight, so please give him feedback. W0LEV.
Thanks, Dave. And that email address is also there for not just for the TechNet, obviously. Its main purpose was for people to ask questions about amateur radio, to get assistance with understanding what it is they're doing with radio, learning more about radio. It just happens that we use that Elmer at NCARC address as a way to contact the TechNet as well, since we're sort of both doing similar things. So that address has multiple purposes, but please do feel free to use it for comments to the TechNet. Next week, again, reminding you that it is a open topic night, so please think about things you'd like to ask about and post them next week, and we'll do what we can to give you answers. Thanks to everybody who participated, and I hope that all of you got as much out of this tonight as I did. And we'll plan to see you next week, and 73s to all. This is N7GES closing the net and returning the repeater to normal use. Thank you very much.
This presentation was brought to you by the Northern Colorado Amateur Radio Club. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.